And Ernest, I never have known if Ray recorded City Lights because he loved the song, because he wanted to shut up Ernest, get E.T. off his back.
Bill Anderson never needed attention. His songs did the talking. Still, Po Folks, Whispering Bill, classics that survived generations without fireworks or pop hooks. But in his 80s, he stunned everyone. Anderson publicly accused 5 Opry stars, openly condemning them for what he called a grotesque betrayal of country music. Join us as we uncover the dark truth behind his anger and why what they did may shock you. Number 1. Kenny Rogers, the legend who sold country's soul. Among all the Opry stars, Bill Anderson once admired, number 1 on the list was Kenny Rogers, and that ranking is exactly why the disappointment cut deepest. No name carried more weight across genres than Kenny Rogers. By the late 1970s, he wasn't simply a country star. He was trusted as a bridge between tradition and the mainstream. Bill Anderson had watched him rise from gritty storytelling into a figure welcomed everywhere, from the Grand Ole Opry to primetime television. That trust is what later turned into quiet hostility. In interviews during the 2000s, Anderson acknowledged Rogers' talent but made his frustration unmistakably clear. He stated, "Country music used to tell the truth even when it hurt. Somewhere along the way, it started trying too hard to be liked." The timing of that remark mattered. It followed years of watching Rogers' crossover success reshape the industry. When Lady reached number 1 in 1980 and Islands in the Stream dominated charts in 1983, Bill Anderson saw a boundary disappear. These songs proved that country music could be polished, softened, and sold without confronting pain, poverty, or consequence. To Anderson, that was surrender. The real damage in his eyes came after. Record labels changed their questions. Songwriters were no longer asked for lived experience. They were asked for repeatable formulas. Heartbreak became vague. Hardship turned decorative. Truth lost urgency. So when Anderson met Rogers, he withdrew. He declined potential collaborations and leaned deliberately into traditional songwriting, releasing work that emphasized moral weight and narrative consequence. To Bill Anderson, Kenny Rogers did not dismantle country music out of malice. He demonstrated how profitable it could be to leave its core behind. And once the industry learned that lesson, there was no reason for it to return. And once that door opened, it never closed again. Number 2. Garth Brooks, the idol Bill Anderson, quietly pushed away. When Bill Anderson thought about the Opry stars he once admired most, Garth Brooks sat shockingly high at number 2, and that alone is what makes the fallout so hard for fans to believe. For years, Anderson spoke of Brooks with awe. Behind closed doors, he described him as the most commanding performer country music ever produced, a rare compliment from a man known for restraint. Yet as Brooks' influence exploded in the early 1990s, admiration began to harden into something closer to alarm. Bill Anderson wasn't watching a star rise. He was watching a genre transform in a way he no longer recognized. Country music, once built for quiet rooms and listening ears, migrated to football stadiums almost overnight. Fireworks, harnesses, smoke, and massive video walls became the norm. Anderson stood in crowds where fans screamed lyrics they barely absorbed, where volume replaced vulnerability. What unsettled him wasn't popularity, it was what popularity demanded in return. In a rare radio interview, Anderson voiced his discomfort with unusual bluntness. Country music wasn't meant to be shouted, it was meant to be felt. That line carried weight because it exposed fear, not nostalgia. He believed spectacle was overpowering the private emotional exchange that once defined the genre. As Brooks broke attendance records, record executives followed the blueprint aggressively. Songwriters were urged to write bigger choruses, louder hooks, simpler emotions. Silence lost its value. Intimacy was treated as a liability. Since then, Anderson drew quiet boundaries. He avoided shared stages and deliberately leaned into acoustic performances and lyric-heavy projects. Those choices were intentional acts of resistance designed to preserve what he felt was slipping away. Number 3. Taylor Swift, the prodigy who walked away first. Ask anyone in Nashville who Bill Anderson once enjoyed listening to the most, and Taylor Swift at number 3 would sound almost impossible to believe. Yet that disbelief is exactly where the fracture begins. Swift arrived in country music as something rare, a teenage songwriter who could articulate heartbreak with clarity far beyond her years. Bill Anderson noticed immediately. He praised her early work privately, impressed by how naturally she handled emotional detail and narrative focus. For a moment, he believed she represented renewal rather than disruption. What followed shocked him more than any stylistic shift ever had. In 2014, when Swift formally exited the country genre, Anderson reacted with a bluntness that startled those around him. According to colleagues, he said, "Country music used to be a lifetime commitment. Now it's a resume." That line traveled fast because it revealed anger disguised as disappointment. To Bill Anderson, Swift's exit felt like a public declaration that country music was temporary, a phase to outgrow. The Grand Ole Opry, once treated as sacred ground, suddenly looked like a stepping stone. Devotion, once assumed, became optional. That idea unsettled him deeply. The ripple effect was immediate. Younger artists stopped talking about staying. They talked about moving on. Country music transformed from a destination into a launch pad, and Bill watched the shift unfold in real time. She set the precedent. Country music, in Bill's view, had always demanded permanence. Once that expectation disappeared, the ground beneath the genre cracked quietly. And when commitment stops being required, identity soon follows it out the door. Number 4. Jason Aldean, the hitmaker who hollowed country out. If you had told Nashville insiders that Jason Aldean would land at number 4 among the Opry stars Bill Anderson once paid attention to, most would have laughed it off. Yet that disbelief is exactly what makes this chapter so unsettling. Jason Aldean never crossed over to pop. He never left country music behind. And that, according to Bill Anderson, was the problem. In private conversations throughout the 2000s and 10s, Anderson became increasingly alarmed by the rise of bro country, a movement Aldean helped normalize at radio level. Beer brands, lifted trucks, tailgates, and dirt roads flooded playlists, while the emotional consequences that once defined country music quietly vanished. In a documented exchange with fellow songwriters, Anderson reportedly said, "They're singing about country life without living it." That line wasn't casual frustration. It was an accusation. To Anderson, country music had always required proximity to hardship. Aldean's catalog, by contrast, presented rural life as endless celebration, carefully curated, frictionless, and emotionally hollow. Songs like Dirt Road Anthem became symbolic turning points for Bill. The imagery felt familiar, yet the substance was missing. There were no aging parents, no financial pressure, no grief carried home at night. What remained were slogans engineered to sell a lifestyle rather than confront reality. Anderson believed Aldean represented a broader industry pivot. Authenticity became procedural. Artists were encouraged to look a certain way, reference approved symbols, and stay within a narrow emotional range. Folk roots and lyrical complexity were quietly sidelined in favor of repetition that tested well with younger demographics. Do you know Bill's response? It was colder and more deliberate. He refused to adjust. He continued writing about aging, regret, faith, and moral weight, subjects bro country avoided. Those songs weren't nostalgic gestures. They were statements. To Bill, bro country wasn't growth. It was erosion wrapped in celebration. And Jason Aldean, in his view, stood at the center of that shift, proof that country music could survive while slowly forgetting what it once demanded from those who sang it. Number 5. Morgan Wallen, The Voice That Finally Broke. Bill Anderson's Patience. When Bill Anderson spoke privately about the Opry stars he had once paid attention to, Morgan Wallen appeared last at number 5, and that placement carried more tension than any other because it symbolized a line finally crossed. Morgan Wallen was never dismissed as untalented. Bill Anderson openly acknowledged Wallen's raw vocal power and instinctive musicality. What unsettled him was the absence of restraint surrounding that talent. To Anderson, ability without responsibility was not impressive. It was dangerous. He believed country music demanded more than chart success. It demanded character. The breaking point came in 2021, when Wallen's controversies dominated headlines far more loudly than his songs. In conversations that circulated quietly through Nashville, Anderson reportedly remarked, "Country music once fought to be respected. Now it excuses behavior it wouldn't have survived before." That statement mattered because it reframed the issue. This was no longer about one artist's mistakes. It was about what the genre was willing to tolerate. Bill Anderson feared the precedent being set. A new generation of artists was watching closely. The message seemed clear. Chaos could coexist with success, and integrity could be negotiated as long as streaming numbers remained high. For Anderson, that was a fundamental rupture. Country music had always asked its singers to represent something larger than themselves. That possibility frightened him more than any stylistic shift ever had. Country music in Bill Anderson's world was never background entertainment. It was meant to sit with listeners in moments of grief, regret, faith, and endurance. When controversy drowned out that purpose, the genre lost its center. So country music doesn't just need new voices, it needs someone brave enough to tell the truth. Was Bill Anderson protecting country music or refusing to let it grow? Do you believe these stars changed country music for the better? Or did Bill Anderson see the collapse before anyone else dared to say it? Tell us your take in the comments. And if you want more untold stories from inside the Opry walls, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us.